Hello and welcome to the Crafty Pint podcast. I'm Will.
I'm James. How you doing there, Will?
I'm great. I'm here in Melbourne. Where are you, James?
Uh, Pretty random. It's a place called Mulga Camp. I think it's some sort of it's some sort of defence land or whatever. We had to fill in a form in case we get checked for being here. It's basically on the side of the Stuart Highway, heading north towards Coober Pedy. We've just been bombing it along since we left Melbourne on Saturday. Just covering as much ground as we can. Although I did call in to see Brad and Nicole at the Overland Corner Hotel yesterday. So we had a bit of a chat with them that will be in a future podcast. And now it's a case of just sort of dashing up to meet some friends in Coober Pedy, then carry on north. So may the adventures begin.
Great. What a holiday you're having, hey? And you're here to talk about the week's news while on leave.
Well, yeah, it's sort of semi-leave. My wife, thankfully, has been doing a lot of the Ks behind the wheel, so I can sit there having thrown a few dollars at Elon Musk, of all people, to stay online while we're driving. So it's actually been a very efficient way to catch up on my email by having it out of office whilst actually working the whole time on the way up. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, continuing the theme of SA, although you won't be there for much longer, there was the awards over the week, though.
That's right, yeah. Royal Adelaide Beer and Cider Awards had been taking place for a few years, part of Beer and Barbecue, run as a standalone event this year. And I guess the big takeaway there was Eclectic Brewing, who I guess they picked up an award last year. Was it for Best New Exhibit? And this year they've taken out, was it Most Outstanding Beer and Show and Champion IPA for one of their beers. We had to do a bit of sort of hunting around to work out who was behind Eclectic Brewing. Found some delightful old homebrew articles and some amazing stuff online about Chris. And I know you've been in touch since the awards.
Yeah, I just shot the team an email and they got back to me. So I'm just sort of trying to arrange time to chat to them to find out more because they are a relatively new brewery. Somewhat, I think, unusually in the modern era. They don't have a tap room at the moment. So it'd be great to hear about it. But, it's good to see a DDH double IPA win a beer and show.
Yeah, and I think some people were just saying, they're like the quiet achievers of the South Australian beer scene. So, we'll do our best not to ruin that too much for him when we chat to him and get Chris's story. Now, since we hit the road, Will, you've launched a new series, Creating a Venue, which is something that you sort of first put forward a few weeks ago. I guess a bit of a sort of insight, picking the brains of someone who knows a thing or two about building beer businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve Jeffers. So I guess a bit of background on this is my thinking was, often when someone announces a venue, we might do a story, and then maybe when a venue's just opened or about to open, we might chat about what's going on. And in this case, I kind of thought, well, why don't we talk to Steve while he's opening the venue to sort of maybe try and piece together a bit more background on what's going on.
Yeah. No, well, we did one many moons ago now with Matt at Boat Rocket when he was moving from being, I guess, contract brewing his beers to building a brewery. And that was a series that garnered a lot of interest. So, yeah, it'd be really interesting to hear what Steve has to say. It was interesting, even in part one, that he says a lot of the principles he took to he's taking to Happy Camper are ones that he's always stood by, despite the fact it's a very different sort of landscape now. And it sort of reminds me of some of the stuff we've discussed maybe, the last 5-10 years, that it's probably harder to maintain the success of a very pointy end hardcore beer or any sort of venue, whereas good pubs, good venues, they've been around for over 1,000 years. And, I guess a lot of the things that make a good pub or a good inn, as they would have been, or a tavern over the years work, are still there. And I guess, it's evolving that with current tastes. So, yeah, it'd be really interesting to see how Steve translates that into another business in an area that hasn't got too much in the way of craft beer, and also what he's doing aside from craft beer.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's hoping to open by November. He's really fingers crossed there. So we think maybe there might be one more in a month and a half, another just before opening, hopefully, and we'll get like a nice sort of yarn about what's going on and what his challenges have been and what is difficult at the moment. One of the things I like as well is he talks a lot about working with Studio Y, who are a pretty impressive architecture design firm. So Stomping Ground was their first venue, and as we'll hear from one of today's guests, they highly rate sort of Stomping Grounds opening as quite a moment in craft beer and sort of really pushing hospitality in a brewery sort of further than it had been for a long time.
Yeah.
And Studio Y, they've also worked with Bridge Road and Brunswick East, another
Yeah.
reference for later on, or you've already seen the title, and also Brick Lane's place in Queen Vic Market, Starwood, and some other great pubs like Fifth Province in St Kilda. So
Yeah.
it's good to sort of look at that as well. We'll have to do a story on Studio Y because they're making very impressive venues at the
Yeah, for
moment.
sure. Yeah, 100%. And also, you put another article live today by Jason, who's doing a lot of stuff for us from the Sydney scene at the minute on Blackwattle Brewery and Bar.
Yeah, absolutely. So Blackwattle opened late last year in the suburb of Alexandra. I don't think they're technically allowed to be in the Inner West Ale Trail. Maybe they might not quite be in the local council area, but I think Sydney siders would call it Inner West, Inner South. So they are in that inner city. They're actually, if Bracket Brewing was still there, they would be a block over from Bracket Brewing. Of course, they've moved to Marrickville now, but they're also Blackwattle. They're quite close to Two Halves as well. So that would be a nice little trail of three, but it's a trail of two, and it's an impressive venue. Having not been there, but I love their focus on live music, having opened it, building a stage, and they seem to be getting a really good crowd in as well.
Yeah. And something that we saw go out for the Independent Brewers Association this week, they've obviously made a lot of progress and a lot of noise and garnered a lot of support from the media and consumers and brewers around the issues like excise tax issues, tax reform issues leading up to the election. Now that they're, I guess, putting more of a focus onto market access, like tap contracts, that side of things. I know sort of about, best part of 10 years ago, the ACCC concluded that it wasn't anti-competitive, but, there's more money going into the ACCC from the re-elected Labor government. I think they're hopeful to get some motion there. So I think they're seeking submissions, is that right, from breweries who are keen to have their voices heard about the challenges that independent brewers are facing in a sort of very closed-off market?
Yeah, I mean, it looks to be a very simple form to fill out. Like with these things, I know it's always a challenge to get people to fill in forms, but if you've got a moment, this is really important if you want to let people know, the people that matter know, how you feel you've been excluded from the market, how you feel you can't get access, those kind of things. I think all these stories do build up, but it does require people to do a really what is a skerrick of work, I think. It
Yeah,
will
yeah,
take you
yeah.
mere moments.
Well, talking of letting people know how you feel and skerricks of work, we've got three other ways you could do that. The Crafty Pint podcast survey is still available if anyone wants to let us know what they think of the first almost year of the Crafty Pint podcast. We'll include the link to that in the show notes. As ever, we're seeking your nominations for Good Beer Citizens of Australia in our Have You Done a Rallings campaign. That's craftypint.com/rallings.
And if you'd like to shout out a brewery that you love, you can, of course, nominate them for Bluestone Yeast Brewery of the Month. That's at craftypint.com/bluestone.
Excellent. And I guess on to this week's guests. Two people who probably don't need much of an introduction, but I guess we'll give them one anyway. Who met, when one of them was singing in a blues band in a bar in the mountains of Austria, and the other one was over supposedly learning how to make wine.
Actually, James, I'm not sure Ben and Maria have ever been introduced quite like that, but and it was
That was a bit
fascinating to
more like
discover.
the sort of some sort of TV dating show from the 80s, wasn't it? Really, as opposed to a beer podcast. But there you go.
Or a late Monty Python sketch. Yeah, it was great to have Ben Maria on, but great to have both of them on together. This was the start of our sort of road trip we took the other week. Obviously, we start off the chat reflecting on 20 years and how they've managed to do it. I think anyone who's heard Ben talk will know how passionate he is about independence and also growing sustainably, growing organically, which they absolutely have do. You hear both him and Maria talk about that and how they've managed to not overcapitalize, not overinvest, and sort of build a very strong brewery that hasn't grown as rapidly as some others, but has remained independent, remained always on the cutting edge. I think of a lot of brewery trends. They're always quick to do it. The first Australian saison you drank would have been from Bridge Road, surely, James.
Oh yeah, it would have been them or Temple. I'd imagine it would have been Bridge Road. It was definitely one of the early ones. But they were doing international collaborations pretty much before anyone else and doing amazing collaborations. Always trying, new. They were the first people to do a hop series over here, celebrating Australian hops. Just always innovators. But I think one of the terms that really stood out listening back to the chat was baby steps, and I thought about using that in the title of the podcast. In the end, we didn't, but they talk about how it's always been slow, steady, manageable growth from once they decided to do what they did, and it seems to be going well for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So enjoy the chat, and if you do enjoy it, make sure you like and subscribe and leave us a review. Cheers.
Cheers.
Placket is Australia's go-to for street-level poster campaigns that cut through the noise. From local brews to global brands, Placket gets your message seen, loud, proud, and right where it matters. Every day, Placket reaches thousands of people through their expansive Australia-wide network. Whether it's street posters, mega sites, indoor cafe posters, or guerrilla activations, they've got you covered. Want to make an impact on the streets? Make Placket part of your next campaign and get in touch today. Phone 03 9354 6611 or visit placket.com. That's PLAKKIT.com.
Ben and Maria, thank you so much for joining us.
No worries. Thanks for coming up to Cold Beechworth.
It's not that cold today.
He's only come across from Cold Bright, and it was pretty cold in Melbourne this morning as well, so all good. I think we should start with the anniversary. So how does it feel to have made 20 years running your independent family-run brewery?
It makes me feel old.
Yeah.
Really? 20 years, a long time.
Yeah.
More than half my adult life, but
Yeah.
all of my adult life almost.
Same with me. I made me realize how long I've been in Australia, half of my life or more. Yeah.
And the celebrations were obviously another Mach 2 bomber and a party up here.
Yeah, we released B2 Mach 15. So we do that every anniversary. I think since our fifth birthday, we've been releasing anniversary beers. Inspired by Murray's anniversary ale. They used to have an anniversary beer, sort of gave me the idea to do that. And we had a community party, really. We just had fire pits at the brewery, some friends, a friend who's a musician came along and played, Amanda, who's been working for us for 16
years. Yeah. She's our longest employee.
She made us a cake. Yeah, we just had a bit of a party outside. Michael Ryan from Provenance made a cocktail with B2 Bomber called Green Bomber Jacket. He makes his own chartreuse called In the Weeds. So it was that and gin. And then Wild Pies are a new local company, and they made a pie with B2 Bomber as well. So we had pies and cocktails and beers and fires.
That's
so
all you need.
Still relatively small scale compared to some of the events you put on here, though. So,
it's more of a celebration. We reached out to all the community groups that we've had something to do with and invited them to come along, schools and kindergarten.
Just the locals who come and drink here. We just, just it's nice. That's what we like. Just an intimate, smaller. Yeah, it felt really nice. It was good.
It was good.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Did you ever think you'd, make it to 20, or is it like running a business? Is it just week at a time, year at a time? Like, how does it sort of feel to have that milestone?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it was ever part of the plan to not make it to 20 or make it to 20. It just sort of happened.
There was a plan, though.
Yeah. There was a plan to start a business and make it successful, but 20 just came around, just like 5 did and 10 did after that. So
we don't really have a plan. How we just sort of hope for the best. But I have to say, when we first started, I thought, what the heck? This is not gonna. Like, I never thought we're gonna survive. I just thought he's crazy.
But I'll marry him anyway.
Because it was really his dream, and I sort of tagged along, and I really questioned it quite hard at the start.
Still questioning it.
Sometimes. I'm more the critical person on the side.
What were you doing back home before moving over here then and getting involved in this business?
I came here quite young.
Okay.
So just before I came here, I was a skiing instructor. So quite, living the party life. But I did study. I was a kindergarten teacher and social worker. So that's my background.
Well, that's good for managing
So I'm a social worker in the brewery, managing staff. And it's
nice.
Comes handy.
Well, going back to the start then, I mean, we've written about it before. A lot of people know how sort of you guys came to be doing this. But take us back there anyway. Like, you went to Europe to learn to make wine, didn't you, originally? Was that, or you were a winemaker that went
Yeah,
to make beer?
so
or?
yeah, grew up here in Beechworth, and then ended up doing some work in a local winery and getting interested in wine. I didn't do well enough at school to get into. I wanted to get into industrial design in Melbourne. I didn't make that cut. Ended up going to Dookie Ag College to study viticulture and some winemaking. So once that was all said and done, as soon as it was done, like a week later, I shipped off with a mate to Germany to wine vintage, and we did the Euro trip, Oktoberfest. Traveled around. After vintage, I think we went to Ireland for a couple of weeks to spend all the money we earned. He came back to Australia, and I stayed on to sort of do a winter season in Austria and then do further wine vintages in Europe. So that kicked off an interest in beer. I was wanting to do something in wine to begin with, and it was great to see all the different angles of wine in Europe, and I came home in between to do vintages back here.
Oh, so it was a fairly extended period.
Over a
wine,
4 year period. Well, and university as well, so 8 year period or something. I was in uni at 17. I think I started school when I was young or something like that. Or skipped a year.
And ended up not getting into uni. Got to use that extra year.
So that, and then eventually fell into beer because coming home I was less impressed with the beer than I had been when I was at university, and realised that there was something going on, and there was an opportunity to do something other than what was available here, particularly in regional Victoria. Stale full or stale light beer essentially was what the quality of beer, and just the diversity was lacking.
Who was making beer anywhere in this wider region back then? Was it just Buffalo, Bullhammon?
Yeah, Burman was there, and there was
Bride started
a year after us.
Brewery, but
they were 1 year.
Yeah, but then,
and then before that there was I think you mentioned it before. There was someone in Rutherglen who started around the same time. I think they became O'Brien's maybe in the long.
There was definitely it was a Vintana or something.
Yeah, Vintara. Yeah, that was in Rutherglen.
They're long gone now. It was the worst thing I've ever put in my mouth.
And their Burman Brewery was a small brewery, like not far from here at Wangaratta.
The best labels ever.
Yeah, they were part of the original High Country Brewery Trail back in the day. But there wasn't much. We'd eventually convinced Maria to come back to Australia for a trip, and we travelled from here to do a vintage in Western Australia, and I worked at Howard Park Wines and Bootleg Brewery were down the road, and we'd been to Little Creatures in Freo, and that was sort of the inspiration to do something similar here back home.
But did you learn to make beer in Europe as well? Is that right? You went
so the last winter season vintage I did, Maria lined up work for me in Südtirol, so
Bolzano,
so Italy, but Austrian speaking part of Italy.
So you met on the slopes, had you, or
what did you say?
Did you met on the slopes? Is that how you?
Yeah, of course. You were the bartender, the glass washer in my bar. I was drinking, and he cleared my table. Some mutual friends, but in the ski area.
Maria was singing in a band, I think, when we first met.
Long time ago.
In a blues band in a town down the road from where we both worked. Maria came back to Australia, and then we did a road trip over to WA.
You forgot to say where you learned to brew beer in Austria.
Oh yes. So
taking you back. Just
he's getting old. There's holes in the memory now.
20 years of abusing beer. So we did a wine vintage in Südtirol, and then returned for a winter season in a place called Beer Himmel, which means beer heaven, and it was an upstairs live music venue that had beers of the world. So it had, I think, Franziskaner was the wheat beer on tap in small kegs to make sure it stayed hazy, and we had Budvar out of Czech was there as well. It had really good quality beer. So that was interesting for me, just to work in it was live music venue too. And then I worked, because I was interested in beer, I enrolled in a postgraduate diploma through Uni of Ballarat while I was living in Austria. And then, so I was doing that in my free time, and I had 1 day a week off, which is Tuesday. And I went and worked for free at Tyroler beer,
Yeah.
remember the name, at a little industrial estate in Innsbruck. So they're still there now. A really small, maybe a 10 hectare kit with some fermenters making traditional Märzen and maybe a Pilsner and a Hefeweizen.
Austrian beer scene is pretty boring. It is still.
It's changing now.
It's changed slowly. They're
Yeah.
very behind. Like
Yeah.
really
Good beers, though.
conservative. Yeah, but what's the wheat beer,
Yeah.
lager? That's
Yeah.
probably it.
Dark lager.
And Maria, what was it like
Nice.
moving? So you would have moved to Margaret River first, and then Beechworth. That would have been worlds apart from
Yeah.
Margaret River.
Yeah.
Let alone.
I came here
Great.
first.
Okay,
to-
right,
I
yeah.
still remember it was Ben's sister's wedding, so it was my first outing coming here to this wedding, and I was very overwhelmed with the whole. And Beechworth, as I'm from a small mountain town, so I don't mind small towns.
Yeah.
It's nice,
Yeah.
But I think I told the story a few times, but I thought in my head Beechworth is at the beach. It's like, what's going on?
Yeah,
So I was a little bit disappointed. Anyway,
20 years later.
yeah, still, no,
Yeah.
I love Beechworth now. Yeah, it's great.
And for people who don't know, the brewery wasn't always here. I know it was only the other place for a short period of time. Do you want to tell people what it was like, the very early days of Bridge Road when the first...
Yeah, it was a short time. It was a long time. It took us. We were originally established the brewery in the shed or garage next to my parents' house, a few hundred meters from here, and that was both of us had jobs working in a local restaurant, and I also worked in vineyards, and we sort of did it in our spare time. So we spent a year renovating the shed, buying equipment, which I bought from a brewery that had already been established but closed down from Penola in South Australia. And then it was a year of getting that all up and commissioned, battling council for the whole year
Because it was in a
to get it, because it's in
residential
a residential
area.
zone.
It took a long time to get the.
Yeah.
It was going to be the end of the world, and it turned out they approved it, and it wasn't. Who would have thought? And it was quite controversial. The local planning department recommended it not be approved, and we canvassed the local councillors who overruled the planning department and let it happen. Every permit from there on has been a good challenge.
Yeah.
You get the
Long memories.
when you get the not so much anymore, but back then it was a bit of a struggle. But then I guess they local planning weren't keen on seeing something like that in a residential zone. And then within 12 months we realized we needed more space. We had originally wanted this location, but it wasn't available. But then the ownership changed hands, and we were offered the opportunity to move into half the space we're in now. So we made that step after 1 year.
Yeah.
So it was a bar like the one behind me, but with wheels.
So
Yeah.
you can, when we did bottling, we
Yeah.
wheeled
Yeah,
the
yeah.
bar out of the way.
Because you didn't have this side, was it just that side of the building originally?
In the
Where
original,
the
but
main
in
bar is
the
a-
Back in the,
Oh,
back
no,
in the
the place is
shed,
small.
it was really
Yeah, yeah.
small.
everything was mobile. The bottling line was on wheels. We sort
Yeah.
of wheel the bar outside to set
Yeah.
up for bottling,
Yeah.
and then finish bottling, clean up, and then set up the bar.
Yeah,
after
the little
bottling.
grain mill,
Yeah, had
sort
to
of
carry it
couple steps
outside.
up and tip it in and catching on the
Nice.
bottom. And
Properly
also, I
manual.
remember we had a couple of cows back in the day,
Yes.
steers, and sometimes it happened. Some of the brews didn't go that well. I remember.
No, it was usually just a yeast lees, which was
Oh, okay. No, anyway, no, there's something, whatever. So the cows got a lot of
Lot of unfermented beer.
booze.
Or
I
ferment-
remember
or
one of
fermented.
yeah. So one of the cows I remember couldn't
Yeah.
stand up, like he was that drunk.
and it was right in the middle of town too. So it was just like, hope no one's
Drunk cow.
Yeah,
But
hopefully it doesn't get
the
out.
meat was so good, hey?
Yeah,
We,
yeah, it
we,
was.
we claim it because they had so much
Okay,
booze that
yeah,
the
yeah.
meat was already marinated. And
So it could be the next, the Beechworth Wagyu. It's basically
Yeah.
just like get cows pissed.
yeah.
Nice. And then you moved away and you had, where'd you get the gear from? Because you had that old wood-clad...
Yeah, that
kit
was
for a
that
while.
was from Penola. Lawrence Victor Estate was the name of the. It was a winery company that set up this brewery. They'd obviously seen the idea of having craft brews in a town and tried it in Penola, but it just didn't make money,
Yeah.
and they didn't see value in it, so they sold the equipment. So yeah, I went there with Dad and tandem trailer and picked everything up and
And
shipped
then
it back.
the brewer came.
Yeah, he
remember?
came and did the first, put down the
Just
first
showed
beer
us
with
how it
us.
works, and
Yeah.
What?
and then steady, I guess, growth and evolution. When was it you did the big sort of upgrade in terms of the brewery here? That's a fair while ago now,
Never.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah,
No,
it's
but you
very
put the
slow
bigger
process.
brewery in.
Yeah, it's always been baby steps. So we
Yeah.
took over this side of the building. The guy who used to run a secondhand store is still here every week. He's our
still
customer, Brian.
one of our best customers.
So we were brewing in where the main bar is to my right, and we had grain storage in here, and then the brewing equipment that's sitting behind me, we commissioned that. I don't know when, but that was when we stepped up scale.
Yeah.
And then we decommissioned the old brewery, and that was purchased by New England Brewing, and they've just decommissioned it. I think sold it on to someone else. So, and before it came to Penola, it was in New Zealand, so it had done a life in New Zealand,
Yeah.
Penola, Beechworth, Urella, and then wherever it is now. So Stainless has
quality.
good life, yeah. So it's pumped out some beer, and then the subsequent steps here have been when money's available, we've reinvested in different equipment.
You've kept moving back and back, haven't you? And
Yeah.
potentially there's no much further you can go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have
Hit
space.
the road now.
Yeah.
And we've got a warehouse on the next block over, but
Yeah.
it's always been an ideal to have production in the venue, and make sure that brewers feel a connection to the people that they serve beer to, and that people who come here understand that this is a place that makes beer. So rather than it would have been easier to go to an industrial shed and set everything up, but it's quite nice to be able to continue expanding and take on the challenge of fitting into the space we have.
And I guess you're pretty central to the people coming to the town, like the appeal, the attraction of Beechworth itself, and I guess even the wider region as well. I guess, is that something you hope to see, and that I guess the locals are pretty happy with, to have this sort of flagship sort of business within town?
Yeah, it's been nice to be able to build it and see people, but with friends who've told us part of the reason they moved to town was because there was a nice place like this to come to. So that's kind of nice. And that was always about trying to make somewhere that maybe we'd like to go to when we visit somewhere, but make that in our hometown and make it available to everyone. So
Yeah, we are definitely a community meeting point. Like, I don't know if we've had wakes here, we had not
Weddings.
many weddings, but we had a few.
Yeah.
But people seem to like to meet here, or if it's nice to be the center.
Yeah.
For the
Well, I guess there's always
community.
been, or for a long while, there's been a focus on the food as well, which I guess is important to create that sort of hub as well.
Yeah, that's something we saw as a point of difference. Even though it was pizza and beer, we tried to elevate the offering, and we have a pretty wide menu, and we try to make sure that the food is as interesting as the beer. That's part of what we do here and in Brunswick as well.
Yeah.
And are there any big highlights, like back on the 20 years, like anything that really stands out?
I'm not sure. It's I think for us personally, our highlight would have been, or for me definitely, was being able to set up the business that we could take a year out when we went to live in Austria for a year.
For sure.
Obviously, COVID fucked that up.
Unfortunate.
But until COVID, I mean, it didn't matter what you were doing at that time.
Yeah.
Your good time was going to end,
Yeah.
regardless of what it was, unless you were, I don't know, selling PPE or something like that. So that was probably a highlight, to be able to get the business up to speed. Business was running profitably without us. Being able to take that time out and do that plan that we had set out was probably, for me, that was a highlight, to be able to do it and then come back and find our way back into the business again.
Yeah, because I think a lot of brewery owners would potentially be jealous of that idea of being able to step outside of the business. And also, Ben, you seem to spend a lot of time sort of on the business and sort of on the grander vision, rather than potentially in the day-to-day. I don't know, maybe you are in the brewery.
Yeah,
all the time.
it ebbs and flows. I'm not in the brewery on the tools. I like to be aware of and be part of any developments we do in beer, be across it, give my opinion even when it's not welcome. So and being able to, times are a little bit harder at the moment, so probably a little bit more in the day-to-day and managing things, but generally, being able to set strategy and be able to find space and headspace to deal with the market at the moment is important as well. So I'm lucky that I don't think I could define my role very well, but I do lots of
Ideas,
different
man,
things.
I would say, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm still the kitchen bitch.
Still banging out the pretzels.
Nah, but also I can step away if it's
Yeah,
quiet. But if it's holidays, it's game on. I'm still in there,
Yeah.
and
Oh, when
Carrying out
this
the
place
rubbish
gets
and-
busy, it gets busy.
yeah, then you're just all hands on deck. Yeah.
Yeah. I know I didn't put it in sort of the suggested question, but I guess in terms of highlights, you got your first ABAS trophy just a few weeks ago. And congratulations on that. But I guess the other thing with that was it was for one of your free time beers. You've actually released a fair number of non-alcoholic beers now. I mean, is that something that sort of came to be because of the success of free time, or is it something you're looking at the market going, this is where things are heading and we should specialize in that? Because you've done sours, you've done fresh hop, you've done non-alc IPAs, you've done a fair number of beers there now.
Yeah, I think we held back on doing a wider range of beer in non-alc space for quite a while. With considering how we normally, and our industry is pretty prolific in releasing new versions of things. Because we really had a long way to go into penetrating the market with free time. We still got a long way to go to make it an everyday item for bottle shops or even in supermarkets. We're in Woolworths with free time at the moment. But yeah, we had a plan to have a release and extend the range for quite some time. And this year we sort of brought it to fruition with the IPA we released, the wet hop free time as well. And then we've developed a stout and a sour as well, and we've got a program of launching them. And I think part of doing that is to bolster the position of the original free time and showing people that we're doing these other things, but don't forget we've got this original one that is really great. And it's what we do with pale ale as well. We do a whole lot of different things, but essentially we want people drinking Beechworth Pale, and that's where we drive people free time and pale ale. So I think that we've been part of a lot of new things in craft beer, new as in Australian market, and free time was part of the newer world of non-alcoholic beer, and we're continuing to do that. So we're releasing, by the time I think this goes live, we'll have free time stout, which was canned last week. It just gets checked off for stability before we release it to the public, so that should happen in the next day or two.
What about a free time Hefeweizen? That would be a thing to do, hey?
Yeah, we're
It's popular in obviously Germany and Austria. That's actually one. Australia lags behind, or comes now. They had the alcohol-free beers for a long time. Very popular.
I remember going to see a European Cup game many years ago. I was living in Munich, and every other game you went to watch was soccer, football. In Germany, you could drink alcohol because it was a European game, and the Brits were so bad. Even though it was a game between Bayern Munich and Barcelona, you still couldn't have alcoholic beer. So I bought my first ever non-alc beer, and I was like, "Are you sure this is non-alcoholic?" It was really good. It takes me back. There you go.
Yeah.
But it was all because the Brits, several countries away, were so badly behaved that no one across Europe could have any alcohol within 5 k's of the ground on those nights. And in terms of making this beers, there've been new learnings you've had to make to make good non-alc beer, because we did a feature not long ago. People won't give you their tips on how they make it. Everyone has their sort of own different ways of doing it.
I think it was that when we made the decision to create a non-alcoholic beer, I was living in Austria and I'd seen the proliferation of the beer there, and I also worked at a brewery and had access to some pretty good lab equipment to look at what the makeup of all those good beers were, or the ones that I liked. Shouldn't say good, the ones that I preferred. So I was able to get that information also from brewers in Europe. And then I think given the way the market is in Australia, when you have a niche at the moment, you really want to hold on to it. So there's probably, as much as people will share some info, they probably want to keep some cards close to their chest, because if you have an advantage, you need to hold on to it for as long as you can. But brewers move around, and there are quite a few brewers who have worked here that don't work here anymore since we've made it. So
and you're going, they're making non-alcoholic beer now. Yeah. And when you say in Germany, because you did a bit of work at breweries when you were doing your year away from Bridge Road, didn't you? Is that right?
It was more once COVID really screwed everything over, and we weren't able to travel back to Australia. It was quite frustrating. Business was struggling, needed something to do, and there was an opportunity to work at a brewery that was just opening. So I got to commission a
That's
brewery
right.
with some guys there. So yeah, that was a good way to
Customers
get
will
my
know.
mind off what was happening.
Yeah. I'd love to go back have a chat about sort of the family side of the business, independence. Before we get there, anything you think has been key in getting you to 20 years? Because there's been a lot of breweries have opened and closed since you guys poured your first beers. So what's been sort of key to getting Bridge Road to this point?
I think since we opened, so the first weekend we opened, we had a retail experience. We also wholesaled our beer, and you could buy our beer online in 2005.
Wow.
So having those things always available,
Yeah.
was something that is key. So that diversity of market. I think also the fact that we didn't seek outside investment for a long time allowed us to be in control of things and probably controlling our debt and making sure we've had some really good management. So I must mention our staff that work really hard for us, that have helped us make some really good decisions, particularly in that COVID period and post-COVID, being tight and putting money away, and making sure our tax dollars weren't spent. We'd see there's plenty of examples of people not accounting for their tax, and that's where their debt lies. So we've always managed to, even when things were really, really, really tight, more recently, we've always managed to put our tax dollars aside. One thing I bang on about all the time is we charge the right amount for our beer, which makes it seem expensive, but I can assure you we're not raking in the margins Asahi or Kirin are raking in. And I think that's something that's really in the last years being able to maintain some margin and not be sucked into the race to the bottom is really important, because we can pay our tax bill.
Be extravagant with your events and your beer styles, but be very sensible when it comes to running the business. Yeah.
But I agree on that. Yeah, we just had a really organic growth. Like at the start too, you can see some businesses that open up and everything is sparkling and they've got 20 employees straight away. We at the start it was just me and Ben, and then slowly we maybe had one apprentice, and very slow growth, wasn't it? And we did probably have an income for the first 5 years. So all of that, I think that all adds up, and then slowly, rather than, unless you have money, but you have money.
Yeah.
Great. Well, let's take a quick break.
Cool.
Cheers.
Sounds good.
Hello and welcome to another Bintani Brewery Booster. I'm joined by Sam, Technical Sales Specialist at Bintani.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks for joining us again, Sam. We're here to chat about recipe reevaluation and continually improving your beers. So, say a brewery's got an award-winning beer, why would they change something that's a good thing?
Yeah, I think it's important as brewers, we generally want to put out a consistent beer, and certainly our customers want to have a consistent experience when they're enjoying our products. We've got to keep in mind we have seasonal ingredients, not just hops, which everyone's aware of, but certainly malt year to year, and also varietal change that happens with malt. So it's important to be looking at our beers year on, year out, and make sure they're still delivering what we hoped to achieve from them. And also in another way, the market as well will change over time. So the same beer that we've had 2 or 3 years ago might be perceived differently through our consumers' responses in different times. And certainly sometimes you notice in competition where the beer you've had that's been, either winning gold medals or silver medals and then sort of drops out and you're saying, I'm brewing it the same, but what's going on? There's certainly a reason to look into that. Right,
Sam, I imagine it's not all about just more hops all the time. Like, where do you think breweries should look at recipe development? Or is that the answer?
Yeah, no, as much as we wish in the sales sort of worlds of our jobs, more and more and more, but that's not the reality for brewers, and also what our customers are looking for. In some instances, in a flavour shift, it might be a change in hop lot or sourcing. So you might have a profile that changes year on year and want to be using from a different area or a different growing region. Sometimes on a pricing basis, there's different pressures as well. Something we're seeing a lot at the moment is in base malt for customers where there might have been a larger range in the past to be more consolidative in their use of base malt, and also a bit more domestically focused, particularly on a high cost, high use ingredient, to make sure you're understanding what you're using consistently and making sure your bottom line's in order.
And Sam, do you see breweries often trip up in certain places when they are working on their recipe?
Trip up, maybe not so much, but we do notice sometimes that they're often within, particularly craft beer industry, sometimes there's restlessness to change things for the purpose, or just for, things have been the same for so long, wanting to just change things up and keep them interesting, which can work, but it sometimes, can throw a bit of a spanner in the works. And the other time also is when breweries will change on a cost exclusive basis, looking to, understandably in some ways, reduce costs in different ways, but how that impacts the beer that they've been working on can have a different effect on their beer output and how they're perceived, or how those beers are perceived by their customers and that sort of thing. It's important, like most things, to look holistically at any of these changes and, I guess, work out what the intent of these changes is and your starting point, finishing point, and what you're hoping to achieve.
Yeah, and are you seeing any sort of wider trends in terms of breweries that are looking to reevaluate or develop their recipes in different ways? What's sort of happening out there?
So a couple of ones we're sort of seeing more broadly is certainly hop usage and profile changing. As there's more sellers on the market and more diversification of growers, brewers looking to change and get much more in tune with the hop profiles they're looking for. That's also not always about using more. There's some great knowledge in that area of hops that can be used at a lower rate but with similar outcomes and that sort of thing. Also, as we have now in our books, more advanced hop products to be able to tweak and change profiles of hops, delivering yield and also reducing cost of the beers on that sort of front. Finding also as well breweries now reassessing their ranges in core range, being a little bit less hands on heart potentially to those beers that have worked for them forever, and looking where those calls are needed to make the hard call, reduce the beer from the range, change it into a seasonal, change it with something else out, keeping the messaging on strong for the whole brand, but making sure that the range is working for everywhere it needs to work for those breweries.
Fantastic. Sam, if people wanted to contact you, how do they find you?
Hit us up, sales@bintani.com.au, and me or one of the team will be happy to be in touch.
Great. Thanks for joining us again, Sam.
Thanks, Will.
Welcome back. Let's talk about independence. Ben, you've been definitely one of the most vocal people to talk about independence, I think, in Australian beer. Do you think it's cutting through it all, or where do you see it?
Well, I don't know if it is cutting through. It has cut through, and I think depending on I don't know what it would be, financial availability of people making decisions, it continues to cut through. I think it's an ideal that most people align to, that the idea of supporting local or an independent business over a multinational business that's sending its profits anywhere, or hiding them and not paying tax maybe, or sending them overseas, or sending them to Australian shareholders. But I think people are genuinely interested in being able to divert their dollars in whenever possible to independent business or small business when they can. But I think that's also depends on their financial standing at the time. So often the larger multinational companies either have a cheaper offering or they have a better sounding offering. Yeah. So that goes the same for hoteliers and wholesale customers. Ideally they'd be liking to have lots of independent beer on tap, but sometimes the larger corporations are allowed to make things look very attractive by giving money or rebates and things, which make that ideal harder to reach, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's good you mentioned that. I was thinking about like things like sustainability in breweries, and there's not sort of new technology or ideas coming through for the beer industry now. They've probably been developed by other businesses outside of beer during the good times. And now they're trying to sell it into an industry that's going, mate, I can't even pay my staff. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's probably that kind of thing. Oh, I really want to support that local brewery, but for now, I've got to wait till a mortgage comes down or whatever.
Yeah, and accept the contract of 5 years because it'll help me in the next 6 months or something. Yeah. But I think I'm also really strong in that independent space on a macro level, because the reason I started making beer was because the market was dominated by a duopoly in Australia, and they had no competition and no need to do anything new and interesting apart from cold filtered lager or whatever it was at the time. Yeah. Whatever the next summer's greatest hit was going to be, Carlton Cold so in terms of the quality and diversity, there was no one pushing it, and it came about in Australia because of independent craft brewers. They challenged them, and I still maintain these large multinationals aren't really interested in a diverse portfolio of beer. They would love it to be only 2 products, but their hand is forced by independence. And if it was only a duopoly, I'm sure we wouldn't see a wide range of flavor profiles or color of beer or yeast strains used. It'd all become more linear.
Well, we're seeing something similar, I think, with retail at the minute. You know, Endeavour and Coles were all over the indies for a while, and now that things have changed and spending patterns are changing, they're just, they're deranging a lot of people.
Yes.
And it's like, we'll sing this glorious song about how much we love local independent businesses, but as soon as it's not working for them on the bottom line, so, see you later. Yeah.
And it goes across the food industry, every industry, I think. So, it's that decision of, if you're interested in diverse food and beverage offering and you have the money to choose something that, is local or independent or alternative to a chain store, I think people would love to do it. Yeah. Sometimes it's convenience and sometimes it's money. So we keep on, banging the drum for independence, but it isn't on everything we do, but we make sure people know about it, and we do encourage people to buy independent. And when someone mentions CUB, I mention Asahi. I really don't like people to come down to the individual brands, because I think it's important to have the conversation and say, well, it's Stone and Wood did this project for the environment. And it was like, well, is that Asahi now? Is that Lineco? Is Kieran doing that across the board, or are they just doing it for a little brand to make it look like they're doing it? If they are, great. But I always bring it back to the top of the tree, because that's real. That's what it is. It isn't any of the sub brands. It's the top brand.
And in terms of selling the message, like we were talking about indie beer, but your staff's t-shirt, they used to say family owned, and now I think they all say family and employee owned. Is it about changing that or making sure it's what you want to be telling?
Yeah, but there's only so much room to on a can or a bottle to share information. So we use the independent seal on that. And then family owned, but then it's employee owned as well. And we also have, we did our share raise as well. So we have shareholders as well. So it's a way of trying, how do you tell all this information at the same time? Independence is a good one. And we are family and employee owned, but we have shareholders as well.
Yeah. And in terms of the different methods you've used, aside from putting stuff on the labels, stuff we talked about there, you've done some more high profile ways of getting the message across. How's the micronation going?
We haven't exercised our rights for national independence, but who knows, we might have to defend ourselves soon with the current things
global
that are going around.
But what of the stunts or sort of the campaigns done over the years, have you found that some have worked really well, that that may be transferable to other people trying to get the message across to their consumers?
I think it's just consistently, telling that story and being able to talk about it when you get asked a question around it, and having initiatives that make people aware. Whether it's an ownership thing like Crafty Pint have done with their ownership of beer, it might get some coverage and it doesn't end up on everyone's fridge or back of the toilet door, but they've seen it at some point. And it's the same as branding and anything. You just want to keep repeating that message until people can understand it and hopefully see value in.
And get your daughter selling food at your festival as well.
Yes.
Put the kids front and centre.
Child labour.
What's your take on how the beer industry's developed? Does it surprise you, or did you think, I know you've gone to America a lot and looked over there, like, is it stronger, fewer breweries, more? Like what's your take on the sort of growth of the market here?
I still remember. Can I just? Because I'm not the beer person here. I'm the pretzel person. But I just remember the starting days when we started. Do you remember there was the Federation Showcase? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And I think there was we went down to that, and there was maybe 15 breweries or something like that. Yeah. So going from there to. How many are out there?
How many?
Victoria alone is well over 100.
That's been within 20 years, I guess. That's the growth. So that's quite explosive.
Because that was the highlight. That was the way you went to learn and who was doing what. The microbrewery showcase back in the day.
Kind of knew everyone. No, I don't actually. I don't even know what's out there. So much.
Yeah.
And I think. From those days too, that we opened with a hospitality offering and we drove that hospitality offering, and even though there was a proliferation for a decade of craft breweries, I don't think we didn't see the hospitality model that you see commonly as a brew pub in the US. Little Creatures kicked it off from, in my mind, that's what I saw, this, big industrial craft brewery that had a hospitality offering as well. But I think that seems rather slow to kick off in Melbourne. Now there are lots of brew pub models that have production and a bar. And then I think the most surprising thing for me recently is to see how many neighborhood breweries have taken off. And I probably wasn't across that so well. We've been to America a few times to do Firestone Walker Festival as a family, and I've been there for Judging Beer World Cup and seen little isolated pockets, but we haven't done a brewery tour of the States or anything where it's wholly focused. We sort of try to do some family time, do the weekend of brewing activity, and then move on. And of course, if there's a brewery, we're going to check it out, but it's not the purpose of the journey. So I think, seeing that proliferation of neighborhood breweries, also the fact that recently it seems to be the model of selling on site, but even interestingly, the smallest brewery still making beer for wholesale. I wonder how that model, I'm surprised with that model, because the margins on wholesale beer, particularly in keg, is super low. Melbourne, really low. And I wonder, there's excise breaks in there for small brewers, but I wonder about the model of someone with really small production capacity servicing a wholesale market with beer kegs. That's, it's tough at our scale, and we're not massive by any means, but at small scale, it must be really tough to make money out of that.
Yeah. In terms of neighbourhood operations, I guess you're part of one of the busiest neighbourhoods in Melbourne now, with the opening of Bridge Road in Brunswick. I guess your own neighbourhood brew pub, and that I was out last Friday, the Friday before, we were wandering around that part. Like, you can walk to a new brewery within 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, like for all night in Brunswick now. So how are you finding that? And I guess also, was that always the plan to have a Melbourne outpost, and how did it come about?
That's a new
Melbourne Outpost was something I've been thinking about for a long time, and it was, we could see how successful we were here, struggling to keep up when we were open and up and running and doing really well. And as I said, I was surprised the model we had, probably until the one that I saw really kicked off a great hospitality brewery offering was when Stomping Ground, they hit the nail on the head with that. And it's something I'd been thinking about forever. Wow, if it's so busy here in Beechworth, what we offer, take that to Melbourne where there wasn't a full, food and beverage offering. It didn't feel like there was. Temple had sort of done a little bit of it. There was an opportunity, and then I just didn't have the money or the time or anything or the headspace to do it. And then, but we had been looking at it for a long time, and we finally said yes to going ahead with it. It is. There's so many breweries in Brunswick and East Brunswick, and you can walk between them now. Pint of Origin was great, by the way. We had a great May. That was really, I think that it sort of was enough to get people who knew about our place to actually stop in. So I've been meaning to go there. Now I've got a reason. I'm going there. So that was really good, and I'm sure we'll see business kick on from that. Not every week, but people will say, "Oh yeah, when there was a good time, I'm going back there." It's on my.
But you were pretty early into that development as well. Like this development still taking shape.
Yeah, it's still under construction.
Well, Will loves it because he loves the cinema there, so he gets to come into yours, have a pizza, have a couple of beers, and then go.
Tuesday night.
$10.
Bridge Road, $10 movie, chips. Yeah. It's the greatest.
It is. It's really good
when you don't have kids in front of you.
Well, when we go there, we send the kids to the cinema or we go ourselves. So it is. It's a really convenient location. I think it does have
a nice feel to it too.
And it's got a very different feel to here. Though, was that deliberate? You wanted to have something that was really contrasted with the more rustic, feel here.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of insert ye olde Beechworth in a brand new building. It could have been done. But this place is like it is because
this is
because we got some wooden posts and put them to prop up.
Look up,
But the timber above us has been there for 120 or 150 years. That it's, you know, it just is what it is. And when we were moving into a new location, it's like, okay, let's embrace that to do something modern and new.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, I see how much people seem to yearn for the ideal or this idea of a 70s pub. I'm sure if they walked into a 70s pub, they would be changing their mind pretty quickly. Unless they,
Smell would get you pretty quick.
well, you forgot your mouth guard, you know.
Stuck to the floor.
Yeah. Yeah, but and it's quite a contrast to you know, the older Melbourne pub scene. But we're not trying to be a pub. We're trying to, you know, be a brewery venue that makes its own beers. We also have Beechworth beers, and we have a pretty different menu, I would say, than what people might expect when they go to a brewery. But yeah, it's still going well. We're working on community engagement is our number one driver. That's how we built this place, through support from the community. So. And that's been more of a challenge down there because we're new to the community and the construction is new to the existing community. You know, it's next to houses and it's a massive development. So that's a big adjustment for local community. You know, they might be not so positive towards a development like that being built in your neighbourhood. So,
Well, I did notice you went in and pretty quickly pulled together the collab brew between the other breweries that had been there a while. Anyway, it was like, we're new here. We're gonna bring you all together.
Run Club and Ride Club, and we've done a few clean up Merry Creeks and trying to show people that we can be a positive part of you know, sponsoring primary schools, all that sort of stuff. It's what we do here. And we want people to use this as a social meeting place. So we're just trying to build our reputation to show that we can bring some net benefit to the community.
Well, I guess the fact you have done it here means you've got runs on the board. It's not like you are a new business going, hey, we're just doing this for show. Let's go and check out what we've been doing for 2 decades, you know? With the real deal.
So you've gone from what, sort of 18 years, your home's in Beechworth, then you've got Melbourne, and now you've got 2 as well because you've got the airport. Like, so it's been a pretty rapid development, hasn't it, of expanding the hospitality footprint?
I think so.
driven that?
The airport came through a deal with Delaware North, who Stomping Ground and the Tap House deal with in the airport as well. And we'd been pitching to them to set up at the tennis. St Andrews Beach Brewery won that pitch. We made a pitch to that, and on the back of that pitch, we sort of built a relationship with Delaware North, and the opportunity came up for the airport. But I think it's on the back of us progressing and doing things. So we were here, and then we developed Brunswick, and then, you know, people see that we're doing good things. The Delaware North guys came and checked out what we'd done, and gave us the opportunity to set something up at the airport as well.
Is the airport more a case of just providing the beer, or you staffing as well?
So designing the place, branding it, and then wholesaling the beer, training the staff. I'm sure the staff transition a bit, but we had all the staff. We had staff here in Beechworth, and we also hosted them in Brunswick to teach them what we're all about, and then stop in when we can down there. So.
And plans for any more venues, whether in Victoria or further afield?
Maybe Austria.
Intro Brewers Austria.
We did brew a beer over there.
We had a
long time ago. We did a brew over there in one of the traditional.
We set up a Lost Valley Brewing Company, and we did a beer release throughout Europe, a pale ale in a brewery that was, I don't know,
castle. It's
over 500 years old, and they never brewed an ale. So,
so you can imagine this guy comes in, they probably thought, what the heck is going on?
But you've actually done a whole bunch of pretty cool collaborations as well. Like, you know, you were my introduction to Bernard Struss.
Oh, that was crazy.
You know, you did the beer with him. You did the beautiful twin set of India Saisons with
Nogna.
Keta when he was at Nogna.
Another one, the Italian guy.
Birra del Borgo.
That was amazing.
2 collaborations with them. Really good experience there. Stone Brewing in the States, we did a collab with as well.
That's right.
It was really good though, being part of those festivals and events. So Birra del Borgo, we went to. Did we go twice? Once to their festival, once just to Rome. And they have an amazing festival, or they did. I don't know if it still happens.
There was probably some of the highlights too in the last 20 years to go and visit those places. I will never forget those experiences.
Well, it's probably not part of your plan. You're like, you focused on your beer, your business, your hospo, not the fact that this beer you're making could take you to a brewery in Italy or whatever, you know.
Necessarily.
And I think there was also that opportunity because we often traveled to Europe to see Maria's family, and then I'd look for work opportunities at the same time, and the chance to travel and experience different beers.
Yeah, I need to make sure I call into a few breweries on our upcoming road trip. Oh, there's a brewery next week, right? That's work expense.
Last trip we went to the Oktoberfest, for example. All texted.
All lessons. You've got one here.
How many liters are tax deductible on one day? Though? That's the question.
The kids had to guide us home.
Yeah.
We sent the kids off the house. Have you guys been to the Oktoberfest?
I've done Start Beer Fest, which takes you down a bit quicker.
But they've got this fair. It's like a Melbourne show, it's like a fair. So we just gave the kids some money or the credit card and say, go.
No cash.
Cash.
Yeah.
Do all the rides, and we were just in the tents, doing that.
And what about, what do you hope Bridge Road looks like in the next 20 years or 10 or 2 or 2 weeks?
We actually haven't had the conversation, have we?
No, the current climate can be negative, but there's also lots of positives to be taken out of it. So just sort of taking on any financial challenges as they come, continuing to develop brand is something we work on culture and communications within the team. That's really important as well. That's part of what we work hard at, and that's what we've been working on in recent times. Continuing to develop the events we do. We sort of brought High Country Hops to a record number last year after a few quieter years, and that's a lot of work to get that so far. But I think building up the business financially that we can reinvest in things. There's lots of things we'd like to do here. Some things are wearing out a little bit over time. So
not you two though. Still full of beans.
Yeah. So just trying to make life more comfortable for everyone. I think that's probably important to us. Our kids are growing up as well. We need to make sure we've got time for them. Get Maria out of the kitchen as much as we can. Yeah. But I think that generally we don't have any big project on the cards at the moment, apart from we budget time at the moment, like every year, trying to make sure we're set up for success, developing brand and strategy, doing events. Pushing the things that are performing. So Free Time, as we mentioned before, Free Time Stout, which is coming out. And then maybe a little bit of new product development. Was recently at the Craft Brewers Conference in the States and saw a few things, not trends that exist, but just got a few ideas. So I'm going to try out some different things later in the year, find a different angle.
Yeah, for me, I would love to do more of those trips, like visiting more of those unique breweries and having a good time.
Yeah, come on, Ben, make some more collaboration beers.
Connections.
And just consolidating things. Maria's been running. She's works a little bit on the side as a cooking teacher at the local primary school. And we've been running competitions with the primary school and getting kids to come up with recipes for pizzas. So
awesome.
Just had the prize winners.
Is that the one of the photos on you walk in?
Just a community engagement.
Oh, well, we'll wrap up pretty soon, I think. But before we do, what's one thing you really wish you knew back when you started Bridge Road all those years ago?
That I'd be doing it for 20 years.
That's a win, surely.
There's no one thing. There's so many things. There's just lessons along the way. Maybe things you do differently, but
you probably would have brewed the alcohol-free beer
a year earlier.
It's a bit of
rest to market. I don't think there's not one thing I look back and think, if only I'd done this, we'd be sitting pretty at the moment. There's plenty of small things I think that we could do differently, but I don't know. You don't get hindsight. So
probably wouldn't have gone overseas if you would have known about COVID.
I don't know.
Maybe just a little bit earlier.
Landed a bit earlier. I don't know if I wanted to be here during that time. It didn't sound like a good time. We might have been. Being in the Austrian mountains without a job isn't a bad place to be when you're not allowed to do much.
Yeah, fair enough.
What about Maria? Probably would have never let me start.
What?
If you had known what it would be like 20 years from now.
No, it's not that bad. But there were sometimes I thought, what are we doing? You get to
of course
roller coaster of
but that might be the case whatever you were doing.
That's life,
Yeah.
So it's been all right, I reckon.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, I mean, there's always, some things that could have been different or done differently. Perceiving trends, I don't know, seeing, but even now it's really hard. People talk about, when things return to normal. They're not returning to normal. This is normal. Today is normal. Tomorrow is normal. So I think, just being able to stay nimble is important. And it's too hard to think back on what you could have done differently because you've got to deal with what you're doing today. So.
Looking at a different way, if someone was looking to open a brew pub in a similar town to Beechworth, somewhere else in the country today, what would be your one word of advice or warning to them?
Depending on the model, there's lots of advice to give. I think being aware of how much work goes into it. I think people are more aware of that than maybe in the past. So be ready for lots of work would be my advice.
For me, it's look after your community.
Yeah.
For me, that's all. If it's a small place, you want to be friends with the locals. That's the key to success, I reckon. Because for us, during the tourist season, we got all the tourists, but then you have to open for the rest of the year. So I think it's really important to look after the community and offer things for them. Not just beer, also other. So for us too, we learn quite quickly. If you want to get people in, you have to have another offer as well, some coffee maybe or some, just to get people in and offer some, like we do the run club or something outside the beer, maybe even it's the place to go.
And I think
the play area / death
playground. Actually, that's the top tip for me. Kids playground.
And whenever I don't get it as often, but I used to get calls from people who are saying, "Hey, can I have some of your time? I'm looking at setting up a brewery." I would ask that person if they're passionate about beer. Are you into beer? What beer do you drink? Are you looking at the next beer that's coming out? Because I think if you're not passionate about beer, just open a bar, don't open a brewery. You need to really care about beer and be inspired by beer and be passionate about it. Because I think there's probably too many breweries that think opening a brewery is enough to draw people in, but it's not the brewery that draws people in. It's the things that Maria touched on, this community or making a great product. You've really got to be passionate. If you're going to make beer, you have to be passionate about beer. You can't just do it because you're passionate about business. Well, there'll be a few outliers that succeeded where their passion was money and business, but unless you're passionate about beer, I don't think it's a smart decision.
I think people can generally tell as well. I think people work out pretty quickly if someone's new and the passion isn't there because the beer quality might not be there, or it gets stale pretty quickly, or the focus isn't quite right. It feels a bit off to the beer drinker now because they know what's going on.
There's so much competition out there. If you're not up there, then people are not going to go somewhere else, I guess.
Right. And if you had one wish or dream for independent beer in Australia, or for Bridge Road?
For independent beer in Australia, I think fair market access would be my thing. Access to stadiums and major events that we pay for through our tax contribution to the government that props up these things. I think consumers and producers should have better access to the market. I think if that happened, if we didn't allow large companies to sew up 90% of the market, then it'll be a happier place for craft brewers and for consumers would be better off as well. The way the ACCC things looks at things doesn't really look at the greater picture of diversity and
real choice rather than the illusion of choice.
Yes, exactly.
For me, still, I think sometimes it's not clear what's what. I just know my friends. They say they still think I don't know, Pirate Life or whatever. This is independent, but a more clear. Like clearly a red light, all right, this is independent.
An alarm goes off when you reach into the fridge.
Whatever, an electric shock, if you pick up the wrong...
Jeez, that's our second podcast in 3 weeks where we've talked about shocking people, electric shocking people.
Well, fantastic. We best finish there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks for the support from Crafty Pint.
That's right.
And get in on Pint of Origin next year from the sounds of things.
Yeah, definitely.
The Crafty Pint podcast is produced and edited by Matt Hoffman. You can get all your beer-related news and reviews on the Crafty Pint website, craftypint.com, and can stay up to date on future podcast episodes via our socials.
We wouldn't be able to produce the podcast or the website, events or festivals we run without the support of the beer industry, whether that's suppliers, bars, breweries or bottle shops. If you'd like to support the show or partner with the Crafty Pint in other ways, please reach out to Craig via the details in the show notes.
And if you're a beer lover who'd like to support what we do, you can join our exclusive club for beer lovers, the Crafty Cabal. Visit craftykabal.com for more.
And until next time, drink good beer.